What's up? This is Justin, the Lesser Dog Tutorials, and this is episode 9 in the Retro FPS tutorial series. And what we'll be doing in this one is kind of implementing a rocket launcher to show you how you would implement a new weapon, kind of go over the basics again of how to add a weapon, but this time we're changing the projectile to be a rocket that moves a lot slower than a bullet. So let's get into it. The first thing I want to do is open up the FPS player, and in the equip weapon section we have this sequence player that we use in the player weapon base. We have this weapon draw and weapon bob actor sequence component. Now if you remember, this uses an experimental class. This class itself is experimental, so I want to not use these currently, so I'm just going to skip this whole thing right here, add a little comment, and we'll just say not used, and I'll make that red. And then up here, weapon bob animation, again we're just going to turn that red so we know that we're not using it. And this is because I've been having issues with this. I think other people have been having issues as well because it's experimental. It just has problems where it's not playing and things like that. So we're just not going to use it. The game will still function correctly. Instead of actually drawing the weapon, it'll just appear, and that's still fine. The game itself, the logic is still going to work. So we're just going to remove that for now. Hopefully in the future it will be better. You could also find other ways to animate, but that's not going to be the focus. We're just going to worry about making sure that the logic works as intended. So with that out of the way, let's get into adding a rocket launcher. So first, open up the assets that are provided in the description, and we're going to take both of those PNG files and just put them into our project. And once you have put them in the folder, we can import them, and then we'll head over to where they're imported. And it is the launcher pickup, so we can go ahead and do a sprite action and apply paper 2D settings, so we have that. And then for the rocket launcher, temp rocket launcher, this is the sprite sheet for it. We're also going to apply the settings. Now if we right click, we can extract the sprites of the sprite sheet, and we'll want to change the extract mode to grid, and we'll do 160 by 160. And then with those extracted, we can also do the create sprite function on the pickup. So now we have all of these images ready to go as sprites. So let's create some flipbooks. The first flipbook is the idle rocket launcher, so that's just going to be the first one. We'll just call it FB. Launcher idle. And then for the shooting, we'll have 1, 2, and 3. These three right here. Create a flipbook, FB underscore launcher fire. And then the last three here are an explosion, and then we'll just create a flipbook, FB underscore launcher explosion. Now for the two animated ones that have more than one frame, we're going to change the frames per second to be 8. Cool. Now we can just move these over to the flipbooks folder. And before we forget, we also have to do a flipbook for the launcher pickup. And we'll throw that over there as well. However, it should be in the pickups folder, so make sure it is in there with the pistol pickup. Now we want to create the pickup in the world. So if we copy this weapon pickup here, and you see the weapon to acquire is pistol, we'll just copy and paste and just move it over here. And then if we change it to launcher, you'll see nothing changes. So let's figure out how to get that to change. So if we open the actual weapon pickup blueprint and we head over to the construction script, all we really need to do is take this weapon to acquire and do a switch on this enum. So depending on what that's set to, we can take this item and then set the flipbook. So we can set it based on if it's none, if it's a pistol, or if it's a launcher. Just hook these up and make sure the item is hooked up to the target. And then all we need to do is say none for this. For the pistol, we just select the pistol pickup. And for the launcher, we select the launcher pickup. It's very simple. That should be all we need to do. So now you can see the launchers there. And over here is the pistol. And then it will just swap based on what one you select. So now let's head over to the blueprints and the weapons. And we have this BP pistol. Why don't we just duplicate this? We'll call that BP launcher. And if we open that up, we can go over here to the variables, and we'll just rename these to be idle launcher and fire launcher. And then we can change once we compile, we can change the actual flipbooks to be the correct flipbooks. So then this would be fire launcher, which is right here. Now, before we forget, we should head over to the data table we made. And if you see in the launcher section, we have none set for this weapon, but we're going to change it to actually be the launcher. So now it will read that information when we use it later. So the next thing we want to do is open up the FPS player blueprint. And if you look over in the fire weapons section, we have this gameplay tag container that we're trying to activate abilities by. The tag is player.fireweapon. Now, if we have multiple weapons, that doesn't really work because it's too general. So what we want to do is first we're going to rename this gameplay tag container to be weapon fire tag container, so we know specifically what it's for. And then if we compile, we can just clear this player.fireweapon. We're not going to use that anymore. But what we are going to do is add specific weapon fire tags. So we'll add under player here, we have kind of a pistol section with a cooldown. But why don't we say that this will be player.weapon.pistol.fire. But again, we don't want this to be specific. So we're really kind of just making these for future reference. The next one will be player.weapon.launcher.fire. And we can remove these. And then we can add a couple more, like player.weapon.pistol.cooldown. And then another one. That would be player.weapon.launcher.cooldown. And you don't even have to add these tags here and remove them. You can actually just go to project settings and add the tags in here. But it's not that big of a deal for me, so I'll just delete them as I make them. So now we have a much better idea kind of what we need. We will remove this pistol cooldown and we'll remove this fire weapon, but all in due time. So at the end of equip weapon, we want to add a few things here so we know which weapon to equip and which tags to give the player. So what we'll do first, right after switch weapon, is update the UI, because if we switch a weapon from the pistol to the launcher, we want to see the launcher UI and not have it stay on the pistol UI. And then we'll take this current weapon and we'll split that struct, because we need to know specific details about what weapon we have. And we'll take that weapon name and we'll do a switch on enum, weapon list. So depending on which weapon it is, we know which tags to give the player. So we can set the weapon fire tag container to be equal to specific options based on which weapon we have. The top one will be blank, meaning we're not going to be firing anything. The middle one, the pistol, we can just get to player, weapon, pistol, fire. And for the launcher, weapon, launcher, fire. So now that we have that ready to go, why don't we clean up the tags so that we no longer have to deal with those tags we aren't using anymore. So a good way to do this would be in the project settings, you can actually just select this fire weapon, and the right side here, there's more actions, and we can say delete. And it will pop up and say where this is being used. So it is being used in the player pistol ability. So why don't we go there and update that. So the player pistol ability right here, we have player.fireweapon as the ability tag. Well, we don't want that. We want player weapon pistol fire. And if we compile and save, head back over to the project settings, we can try to delete it again, and it worked. Now the player pistol cooldown should be deleted too, but you'll see obviously it's being used in the GE pistol cooldown. So why don't we go to that? And I believe that's in weapons. So if we look for our tags, right here under granted tags, we see player.pistol.cooldown. Let's remove that, and we will select player weapon pistol cooldown. Compile and save and see if that deletes. And it is not going to delete. It's used in the player pistol ability. So let's find that. Right here, player pistol cooldown. So let's clear that and go to player weapon pistol cooldown. Compile and save and delete it again. And now we see it's used in the enemy pistol ability. So let's do that. And we'll just use, since it's the enemy, we're still going to use this. It's fine. Play weapon pistol cooldown. That should, I think, be everything. And there you go. Now things are cleaned up a bit and we can move on. All right, so now that we have this rocket launcher in the world, let's go ahead and play and see what happens when we run over it. So we'll run over the pistol, and we have the pistol, it's all fine. Run over the rocket launcher, and it switches the UI just like it's supposed to. And if we click, nothing happens. That's because we don't have an ability for this yet. And also, we can't really switch back to the pistol at all. So let's add inputs so that we can switch weapons. In the project settings, we'll just go to input. And then in the action mappings, we'll just add two. The first one will be switch pistol. And the next one will be switch launcher. And for switch pistol, we'll just use the 1 on the keyboard, and for launcher, we'll use 2. And then in the FPS player, we want to implement those. So we'll do switch pistol, switch launcher. So the first thing we'll want to do is see if we have the weapon. So we can drag out that has weapon. However, let's make a couple changes to this. The input of has weapon can be changed to be the weapon list enum. And with that, we don't need to break this. We can just go straight into here to do our test. And then if we compile, you'll see there's an error. So back in the event graph, we'll look for where that error occurs, and it is right here. And in order for this to be fixed, we just need to break the weapon data and plug in the weapon name into this. And compile and save, everything should be working. However, if you select this has weapon, you'll see that we can't select the drop down, which would be useful. So if you go over to the input here, you'll see there is a pass by reference checked. If you turn that off, we can now select what we need. So for the top one here for the pistol, we're just going to look and see if we already have the pistol. And so we'll want to branch from that. And then we will get the weapon from the data table. And then the weapon is the pistol. And then we'll just equip the weapon. And make sure you pass in the weapon data into the weapon. Same thing goes for the launcher. We just change this to launcher, this to launcher, and we're good. All right, with that done, we'll test it out and see if we can switch back to the pistol. If we hit 2, nothing happens. And if we hit 1, we're back to the pistol. 2, we're at the rocket launcher. So now let's figure out how we can add ammo when we run over the rocket launcher. Over again in the FPS player blueprint, we have this add ammo section, and the rockets here don't do anything. So what we want to do is duplicate this add bullets function, and we'll just call it add rockets. And then in the event graph, we can just put that right here. And the ammo size, again, will be linked up just like the top one. And if we open up the add rockets, we can kind of figure out what's going on in here. So at the beginning here, we want to switch that from bullets to be rockets. And if we move down the line here, we see there's an ammo gain tag container that we have, which is pickup.ammo.bullets.small. Obviously, we want to change this to be, we'll add a new gameplay tag, and this should be pickup.ammo.rockets.small. And then we will remove the bullets.small. If you just select everything and turn it off and then try it again, that should work. So now it will try to activate an ability using this tag, but there is no ability with that tag. So let's create the ammo rocket gain ability. Alas, we mustn't forget before we leave that we're switching max bullets to be max rockets. So we'll throw that in there. All right. So over in the pickup abilities folder, within the abilities folder, we're going to create the gameplay ability for the rocket ammo small. So create a gameplay ability. And we're going to name this GA_ammo rocket small. And then before we mess with that, we're going to create another blueprint, and this is going to be the gameplay effect that is going to actually add the rockets. So we'll rename this to GE_ammo rocket small effect. If we open the gameplay effect for these rockets, we can just say that it's an instant modifier, and it will add 2 rockets. So simple as that. And then over in the ammo rocket small gameplay ability, we don't need the end ability, but right here on activate ability, we'll do commit. And then we will apply gameplay effect to owner. And the gameplay effect is the ammo rockets small effect. So if you select the class defaults, we can say that the ability tag is equal to pickup ammo rockets small. The only other thing I think we need to do is add this ability to our default abilities. So we have this ammo bullet small down here. We'll just add a new one, which is ammo rocket small. Cool. Let's test it out and see if it works. There you go. There's 2 bullets or 2 rockets for the rocket launcher. As another check, we'll just copy and paste and just kind of move this over here. So there's 2 of them. We'll hit play again. Picked up our gun. We now have 2 rockets, and now we have 4 rockets. So we can also switch back and forth, and everything is working except for the ability of the rocket launcher. So let's figure that out. So in the abilities folder, why don't we create a folder specifically for the pistol, and then another folder specifically for the launcher. So let's just take all of these, so everything but the bullet weapon ability, and we'll just put that into the pistol section. So in here, we want to take the player pistol ability, the player bullet spend, and the player pistol damage, and we're going to duplicate these. And we're just going to take these and move them over into the launcher folder. And then we'll just rename these. So the player pistol ability will be player launcher ability, and so forth. And with those renamed, we're going to go over to the weapons folder where we have the pistol cooldown, and we'll duplicate that also. And again, name this for the launcher. While we're here, why don't we just open up the launcher cooldown, and we'll just change it so that we're using the correct tag. And then also we want to change the duration to be something a little higher. We'll just do 0.5. Now back over in the abilities, launcher, let's make these update so that they work for the launcher. First thing we'll want is we'll change the bullets to be rockets, and then we'll check if the rockets are greater than 0. And then we have a player pistol weapon component that we can change to the launcher. We can change the variable type. You'll see a little bit of an error here. And then we'll rename this to be launcher. And then we'll delete that reference because we want to switch it to this. Now it uses a shoot pistol function that we're not going to be using. And instead, we want to head over to the BP launcher. And in here, we have shoot pistol because we copied this from the pistol fire. So we'll just say launcher fire animation. And we'll change this to be shoot launcher. And then if we compile and save and head back over, we can instead pull out from this launcher weapon, add a reroute node, and then do shoot launcher. Here in the apply gameplay effect to owner, we'll change that from bullet spend to be rocket spend. Cool. Over on the side here, we're not using a line trace because the rocket's going to be moving at a slower rate of speed. So really, we can just delete all of this for now. So the last one, the last node or function is going to be shoot launcher. Now, if you compile, you'll see there's an error, and that's in the get weapon section. So why don't we update this too? So the first thing is swap this out. And then here we're checking the child actor of the weapon. And we're going to cast to not the pistol. Instead, we're casting to a launcher. And then we will set this component here and then return. Compile and save, and that should be all we need to do in here. So now with the class defaults selected, we want to change the ability tag because this is not pistol fire. This is launcher fire. And then this is not the pistol cooldown. This is the launcher cooldown. And then at the bottom here, we have the gameplay effect cooldown class here. Again, we're changing this to launcher cooldown. So I think that's all that we need to do in here. So we have the ability working. So if we were to go to the FPS player in the class defaults and add the default ability, and that will be the launcher, player launcher ability, and compile and save, it should actually show an animation. So there's the pistol and here's the launcher. So it is doing an animation it looks like it's firing, but it's just not actually doing anything yet. But we're on our way to getting this thing to work. So let's move on and continue implementing this. So if we open up the player rocket spend, we can just modify this so that we are removing a rocket. And if we test that out, you can see the rockets are now removed. So it will stop firing when it hits 0, and then when you run over and you get 2 more, you can fire again, and now there's no more. So the firing of the launcher works. So let's figure out the rest. If we open up the launcher damage, we could just change this to be maybe -400, something like extreme, because it is going to be a boatload of damage. Now let's try to fire something out of the launcher. So actually in this launcher folder, why don't we just create a new actor that we'll just call BP rocket. And in the rocket, we're just going to use kind of a temporary thing. This is something where you can update this to be whatever you want, but we just want to visually see something flying. So what we're going to use is we'll add a paper sprite component, and for the sprite, we'll just choose the rocket icon. And then for the rocket icon, we'll add a sphere collision around it so that we know kind of what it's going to come in contact with. But let's change the sprite itself to be a scale of 2.0 all the way across, so it's a little bit bigger. And we'll shrink the sphere radius to be kind of around it at a size that maybe is a little larger. We'll just do maybe 12. And that way it has a little leeway. It doesn't really need to specifically touch head on an enemy. It will just kind of, if it's close, it'll do the damage. And if you want it to be a little bit more forgiving, you could just increase that sphere radius size and change it to whatever you want for your game. So additionally, what we can do is select the top here, or the root, scene root, and we're going to add something called projectile movement as a way to propel this through the scene. And if we just search for gravity, we'll just set this to 0 because we don't want it actually being affected and going and moving downward. We want it to move straight through, just like the old retro FPS games. So over in the event graph of the rocket, we want to have it so that the sprite is always facing the player. So if we go to the pickup blueprint, we can get this event tick section here, copy it all, and then paste it here. And that all we need to replace is the actual sprite, so that this will go and replace the item. So now it is always going to face the player. So the next thing we want to do is remove these, select the sphere, and scroll down to the bottom here. And we want to say on component begin overlap. And essentially what we're going to do is take this other actor and we'll get the class. And for the return, we want to make sure that it is not equal to the player, but we're going to use the equals so that we can branch out and decide what to do if we come in contact with the player, which will be immediate because it will be spawned directly where the player is. And speaking of that, we need to head over to the actual weapon blueprint of the launcher, and we want to create a spawn point for the rockets. So I'm going to add another sphere collision over here that really isn't going to be a collision. It's just a reference point. And I'll just say rocket spawn point. If you look at the viewport here, we can change the radius to be something small. And we'll just move this out, maybe 80 would be fine. And then we want to make sure with that selected that we are not going to do any collision, and we're not going to generate any overlap events. And with that done, let's head over to the event graph. And we're going to spawn this rocket real quick. So we'll just take everything after the update UI, and we'll just move it over. And then right after update UI, we're going to take this rocket spawn point. We're going to get world transform. And then we're going to spawn actor from class. And if we hook that up, we can say that it's going to be the rocket. And then for the spawn transform, we're using this return here. Then we can compile and save. And over in the rocket, we want to make sure on the projectile movement that the velocity is really high, because at 1, it's going to be moving incredibly slow. So if we do maybe 2000, that should be a little better. And then we can finish out this section here, where if this rocket hits someone, so if this is the player, and that's true, we're not going to do anything. But if it's false, meaning we're not hitting the player, then we're going to take this other actor and cast to the BP enemy. And then all we really want to do is get the ability system component, because we need to remove the health or apply that damage. So from this, we actually want to apply gameplay effect to target. But if you turn off context sensitive, then you'll be able to actually see it. And it's right here, apply gameplay effect to target. We'll hook that up when the cast has succeeded. And this will go into the target here, and it will go into this target here. And then we need to create context. So as the enemy here, we will make effect context, which actually we can just hook up through here. And then that will go into the context section. But we need to make sure we're also applying this gameplay effect class. So just look for launcher and find your player launcher damage. Now compile and save, and let's see if the rocket actually fires. And that did. It shot out and it hit the guy and he died immediately. So now we have rockets actually working. And it's really as simple as that when you're applying a new weapon. It's just filling out a few of the default things so that Unreal knows how to work with this stuff. It's kind of tedious, but it's way less tedious using this gameplay effect and ability system than it would be if you were to make it yourself. So let's polish this up and get some explosions when the rockets hit, and we'll be done. So in order to get that explosion actually happening, it's not that difficult. So what we'll do is create a blueprint class and choose actor. And we'll call this BP underscore rocket explosion. And if we open up that rocket explosion blueprint, then really all we need to do is add the flipbook. And then we can select that explosion. And then we'll turn it 90 degrees on the Z, and we'll just move it out 0.1 on the X. That way, when it spawns, it will be right in front of wherever the impact normal is. In the event graph, we just need the begin play. So essentially, this will run when this is spawned. And what we'll want to do is get the length of the flipbook animation, right? And delay that amount of time. And once it has run its course, we destroy the actor. Very simple. Now that we have that done, we can head back over to the rocket and we'll change some things in here. For instance, we don't even need to check for the player, so we can delete that. We also don't need to do the sphere. So we can remove this sphere completely, drag the paper sprite over top of the root and change that. And if you select the projectile movement down at the bottom here, we can see on projectile stop is right here. And that will give us this new event. We'll just right click the impact result, split the struct, and now we have kind of all of the information we need here. So if we just hook up this cast to the BP enemy right at the beginning, we can check the impact result hit actor and see if that is the enemy. And if it is, we'll just do the gameplay effect. After we have checked, we can spawn actor from class, choose our explosion, and we want to right click this spawn transform and split it because the location we want is the impact point over here in this event. So select the impact point and just drag it on over to this spawn location. Just kind of move this out of the way a bit. And we're going to spawn this regardless if it's an enemy or not. So we'll want to say, if this cast has failed, it's not an enemy. We're going to actually create a reroute node here, and then we'll run it into the cast failed. And then we can just kind of move this stuff out of the way, a little easier to understand. Next, we want to decide how the explosion will be rotated. So we'll just take this impact normal result, and then we will do a rotation from X vector, and we'll plug that in to the rotation. Just move that down. And then once this has spawned, we don't need the rocket anymore, so we can destroy the actor. So once it spawns the actual explosion, then the explosion will run its flipbook and then destroy itself. And all the while, we're checking to see if we do hit an enemy. And if we do the damage. So let's compile and save and see how that looks. Shoot the rocket, it hits the wall, it hits that wall, and it hits the enemy, and the enemy dies. So the only other thing I think we want to do is change the size of this explosion. It's a little small. Compile and save and see how that looks. Yeah, it's a little better. Grab 2 more rockets here. Oh, I missed him. Let's try it again. A little hard to hit him. Bam, he's dead. And that's going to do it for this tutorial. If, for instance, you wanted to, say, make a melee weapon, you'd follow the same sort of steps as creating this weapon. However, you wouldn't really shoot a projectile. If anything, I would probably put some sort of collision box or sphere in front of the player, and then check if an enemy is in that collision area, and then apply damage that way. Thank you for watching. If you liked the video, please hit like, please subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.